have checked out some of your podcasts. I think maybe all of them.
Yes. Well, there's one series, which is Emily is Live, and then there's A Drummer's Guide 2. A Drummer's Guide 2 has over 100 episodes, so I'd be very surprised if you managed to get through all of those.
Okay, no, I'm thinking of the Emily is Live.
Yes, yeah. There's only, I think, 9 episodes of that because I sort of took a hiatus because I'm exhausted, basically. I'm very busy.
Well, good. Probably the most recent thing that you've done that the world is aware of would be the Count Me In thing, I think. Yes?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Definitely. Yeah, it's been a really nice response to that film documentary, which has been amazing.
Yeah, I watched it when it first came out. I need to watch it again. So when did you actually film your parts of it?
Oh, that was filmed. In fact, I was thinking about this literally this morning, trying to work it out. It was my parts, I think, were done in 2018, maybe 2017. So all it was a random phone call from a friend who just said, look, we're doing this documentary. It wasn't like a Netflix thing or anything like that. It kind of was more, we don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's going to be something celebrating drummers and the mutual experience that drummers have and the importance of their role, like in bands, and, you know, because nobody's really focused on that. And we think that's interesting. And the woman who phoned me was the editor of a magazine over here called Rhythm, and then a filmmaker friend of hers. So she said, look, you know, I'd known her for a while. She'd seen all these A Drummer's Guide 2 podcasts and pieces to video to camera that I'd done. And she was just like, look, do you want to come and do this interview? You're really great on camera. You're obviously very confident. You know what you're sort of doing and saying and whatever. I was like, oh, I don't really know what I'm saying, really, but okay. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll come do that. And we just did this. I suppose we filmed maybe an hour or two of footage. She asked me a bunch of questions. I essentially just sat there just talking about how much I love drummers, I love drums. And that was all it was. And I was just like, cool, that was a fun thing, even if it doesn't, like, nothing comes of it, because I'm sure you guys know what it's like. You get asked to do so many things, and 99.9% of the time, nothing really comes of it. Maybe something small, but certainly not like a Netflix documentary. So it was only, whenever it was, probably 3 years later, that it was like, oh no, this is actually going to be something. And it was like, oh, great. Okay, cool. This is kind of a bonus because I've done the work. I've done what I needed to do. So whatever comes of it is kind of an extra added thing. And then it came out and I watched it. And so for a bit of backstory, I come from, my dad is in film and TV and all of that. So I have a very critical eye when it comes to things like documentaries and just the way that things are made. It's a nightmare. It's just how I was brought up, but I can be very critical. Right. And the opening shot of the whole documentary, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be good. And then I watched it and I was like, you know what? I just thought they did such a great job of just sort of telling the story and the common experience of what it is to be a drummer and have such love for the drums. And, you know, each story was connected in a way, even though most of us don't know each other, not closely at least. And it was just this beautiful moment of like feeling like you belong to this larger group of people, if that makes sense.
Have you met any, like Stephen Perkins or any of the other drummers that are in that doc?
So I hadn't met Stephen. I tell you, I met Taylor literally maybe a year after I shot that. And so that was really nice. We had a really nice connection. We went and had lunch and sort of essentially chatted about drums for like 3 hours. It was just the best. He was the sweetest guy. He was so kind. And obviously it's absolutely heartbreaking what has happened recently. Just so shocking. And then Cindy Blackman I've met maybe twice, just at like drum shows, stuff like that. Who else was in it? Oh, obviously all the English drummers. We all know each other. So like Bob Henry, I've known for years. He in fact knew my great aunt Mary, which is a very strange connection. But so yeah, I mean, I think the drum community, we all kind of run into each other at various times. It's a small world, isn't it, really? It's a small world. And plus, it's a great opener. In fact, that was my opener to Taylor. When I ran into him, I said 2 things. I said, firstly, I think we're both a Zildjian family. And he was like, oh, no way. I was like, and randomly, we're in the same documentary that Louise has done. He was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And that was kind of my opener to him, and that's what got our conversation started. So yeah, it's amazing how drums can truly connect complete strangers, essentially, in a really beautiful way.
I think that we're going to do an episode, a podcast episode about Taylor Hawkins and the people that we know that have actually met him, hung out with him, jammed with him. I met him, years ago, and I did a post about that on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, everybody says he was a great guy,
Very kind. And
Yeah.
the thing that struck me the most about him was when we were sat having lunch, there were a lot of fans kicking about, and they would come over, and obviously we've all worked with a lot of different artists and different people, and it's interesting watching artists' reactions to their fans and interactions with their fans.
Mm-hmm.
And from him, there was nothing but love and respect. He took the time to engage, and I just thought that was so admirable, because I can only imagine the hundreds of thousands of interactions that he's had over the years, and still he took the time. And I was just like, wow, that is an exemplary example of how you should be with your fans, I think. So it really stood out to me. It really affected me in a really beautiful way. So great guy.
Especially if you're trying to have lunch or dinner or something and people are coming up to you, yet you drop what you're doing or eating and still give them time.
Exactly.
That's special.
And so a friend of mine told me about how he heard that the band that was opening for Foo Fighters on their last thing in South America, I believe, or one of the bands, that it was, brought their friends in to meet Foo Fighters, on a day off or whatever. And they had about 20 people. They had like an entourage of 20. He said that Taylor took the time to talk to every one of those people.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me even slightly. Like, just amazing, not even, there's a very small percentage of people that are like that and show that amount of care with people. And I think it's very special. Very special. So yeah,
I think that band is called Machine Gun Kelly.
Oh, the artist Machine Gun Kelly. Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, I didn't realize that Machine Gun Kelly was supporting. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah, that was what I heard. Okay, so I have a few notes here. You have done gigs with Bryan Ferry, and I think, did you record an album with him as well?
Yeah, that's right. An album called Olympia that came out in, I want to say 2010. I think it was 2010. Yeah. So
I'm gonna have to look that up. Now, I'm sure that when you guys do gigs, you play some of the material from the Avalon album.
Yes.
Like more than this. You've got to, that has to be, all right. So that album is so pristine. The drum sounds are so pristine, and production is, it's one of the greatest produced and engineered albums of all time. So how do you go about, do you try to replicate the parts that Andy Newmark played?
Yeah, very much so. To be fair, in every single musical situation I go into, regardless whether it's, if there has been a drummer there before I'm there, if I'm not the original drummer, my number one thing is to respect the parts that have been created, that have been recorded, that the fans are expecting to hear, used to hear. And yeah, it's like that with everyone. It was the same with when I went in on The Darkness. Ed Graham had been there for so long, and these parts were just set, and I was like, right, I'm coming in and I'm about to record an album with these guys, so technically I'm there from ground zero in terms of my parts. However, there is a vibe that goes along with The Darkness that Ed had created, and I was like, I need to respect that. So I need to bring a bit of Ed's energy, spirit, whatever you want to call it, into what I do and influence what I do. And it was the same with Bryan. It was like, I mean, those are like you say, legendary album, legendary drummer, legendary parts. So I was like, I am sticking to this, because you can't, to me, And I might be wrong, people might disagree with this. I find it disrespectful when people don't honor those parts, because they are, to me, they're such a big part of the song.
Yeah.
And it's like when, I don't know whether you guys have this, like say you're out watching, it can be an artist, whatever, and they do a rework of like their biggest hit. They play it faster, or they play it like super slow or whatever. And I often think, you do know that the fans just really want to hear that song that they love in the way that they've always loved it, and they fell in love with it, and you know, they were, I don't know, dancing with their first love when they heard it, and they want to hear it like that. Do you know what I mean? And I very much feel like that about it. Is unless the artist is explicitly saying to me, we want to do this differently, I'm very much in the camp of no, I'm playing the parts. Inevitably, a bit of what I bring to the table will rub off, because that's inevitable. But I'll always have the starting point of those original parts, and especially with a drummer like Andy Newmark. I mean, come on, he's just so good. It's ridiculous. Like, why would you not want to start from that point and move on from there? So yeah.
And you may know this, but the drums on the Avalon album were recorded last.
Oh, I did not know that, but that makes sense to me now you're saying that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why, because the album that I recorded on, I was the last person to record on it also. So,
well, see, what I read is that or actually, I think I heard this on an interview. The drums on that record were drum machine on the entire album, and I think they decided last minute, let's bring a real drummer in, and so Andy Newmark played his parts last.
There you go. I'm learning something new. I love that. That's amazing. And yeah, like I say, it was a similar experience for me, because the reason that I got involved with Bryan was that there was a very last minute show that his regular drummer couldn't do. And I got a call from the manager, who I'd worked on maybe 6 years before on some random one-off gig. And he called me. I mean, why he called me, I have no idea, still to this day. He's like, look, there's a gig tomorrow, can you come do it? And I was like, yeah, sure, who's it with? And he was like, oh, it's Bryan Ferry. I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. Sure. I think I was like 23 or something at the time. I mean, it was really like a bit of a shock, but I was like, yeah, cool. Yes, I can do that. That typical thing of just say yes and deal with it. And then when I went and did the show, and it all kind of went well, and Bryan seemed very happy. And then I got a phone call from his studio office, from the office at the studio, just saying, look, Bryan wants you to come in to hang out at the studio. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but yeah, sure. Okay, I'll come hang out. And I got there, and he came in, he was like, right, are we ready to record some drums then? And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And at the time, I think, how many drummers were on that album at that point? Maybe four or five different drummers on all the different tracks. And basically, he got me to record with it, and like everything was there. You know, Johnny Greenwood's on that album, Flea was on that. I mean, it's just Brian Eno. There's so many people on this album already, and he was like, "Yeah, I just want you to record along with it as well." And I was like, "Okay." I mean, I was very young. I didn't know. I was just like, "Okay, I'll just play and whatever." So I did that, and we spent a couple of days doing, I think it was all 10 tracks, and it ended up being me on 4 of them, I think it was. But yeah, and like you say, and it ended up that I was added as another drummer on top of some of those tracks. It was that I think I replaced one other drummer on one of the other ones. And it was very unusual for me, because I hadn't had a huge amount of studio experience at the time. So to work like that, I was like, is this normal? Like, I feel like there's usually only one drummer on a song, and there seems to be like 3 on every track. So yeah, it was definitely a learning curve, and just kind of just moving with it and just going, cool, all right, yeah, let's do that then. And it was very sort of, it was a really great environment, really great experience. And then I ended up doing these corporate shows for the next, I think it was 3 years after that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And I watched you talking about recording with The Darkness. You've got just, one video. It's maybe a half hour or so.
Yeah.
That was cool. And I like the fact that you talk about how, you guys went for a curry, and then how the 2 brothers, or maybe all 3 of them, they're really into running.
They are. Yeah.
It's just cool to hear stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I've very much been an advocate of kind of lifting the curtain a bit on exactly that, all the stuff that you don't really hear about, because I think, the music industry is kind of, it has this veil over it, and nobody really knows how you get into it, or the reality of what it is or anything like that. And I just feel like if people could understand a bit more, I think that's quite an interesting idea to get more people in through the door. And I'm all about just the idea that anyone can be sort of a session musician, for instance, like I am, because I believe that if I can do it, anyone can do it. So I just tried to be really active in sort of explaining the experiences that might help someone to understand what it takes to be in this industry, because the playing side of it is such a tiny part, but nobody speaks about all the other stuff that you need, or like you're saying, the other experiences that go along with being a professional musician, like working out and going running every morning with three blokes. And man, can I just say, they are so tall.
Yeah.
So their legs are so long that I was always the one behind, like, guys. So yeah, it's silly things like that people don't really talk about. The fact that it was essentially me just going to hang out with them. It wasn't really about my playing. I mean, we did play, and it all was great and it worked, but it was more the personalities and sitting down and chatting, like you say, having a curry and just going, yeah, let's just chew the fat. And what are you about? And I was like, what are you guys about? And that was it. It was kind of just working out if we liked each other, because like I say, I've said this before, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like being in a band is kind of like trying to find 2, 3, 4 other people that you are willing to have a relationship with, in the same way that you'd have like a marriage almost. It's that type of dedication to a group of people, and that group of people have to have the same sort of goals, direction, energy to get to those goals, and that's a really difficult thing to do. So it's really important that you get on with those people to the nth degree, that you don't mind spending 24 hours a day on a stinky bus with them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Another artist that you have worked with, Howard Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, Howard, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, great
awesome.
songs, huh? And good voice. I thought his record sounded good. And Bill and I were talking about that song that I just, no one is to blame, right?
Yeah.
Where Phil Collins on drums, and how he really put his signature on the drum part and the sound. You just right away, it's Phil Collins. So I was wondering, yeah, you must try to give that one the Phil Collins, treatment, sort of. I mean, you got to play those parts, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Howard Jones gig was a really interesting one for me, because it's actually a double drummer gig.
Oh.
So it's Jonathan Atkinson is the other drummer. Now, Jonathan's been with Howard for, I think it was 15 years. It's probably longer now, actually. And then I was brought in sort of, when was that? 2017. And Howard sort of said to me, he'd seen me play, we were on, we did a tour where I was playing with Tom Bailey from the Thompson Twins, and Howard was supporting. So he'd seen me play a lot. And he sort of saw that I was quite visual and energetic when I played. And I think he quite liked that. So he was like, look, he was so funny actually having this conversation. It's like, right, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. So obviously Jonathan's was always a really good friend of mine. He's like, right, so I'm thinking like a double drummer thing. And I was like, oh, that's great. He said, but here's the thing, I'd love it if you were standing up when you were playing. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, now I have to stress, I'm not saying that you're a percussionist. I know you're not a percussionist. I know that you're a drummer. And like, I just need to say that. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So basically my role was to cover all those sort of, all those percussion, electronic drum parts that was so integral to the song, but obviously can only be done with so many limbs. And they wanted to take stuff off of track so that it could be more live and more energetic. And obviously, like I say, I knew I could bring that sort of energy, and I think he did too. So it became about making it even more of a performance as well. So it wasn't just about the parts, which again is that interesting thing about talking about being a session musician. it isn't always just about the playing, it's about how you present that sort of energy and how you put on a show, if that makes sense. So the way that we split it in terms of drum parts was Jonathan basically said to me, he said, look, I'm up for doing 0 fills. I'm up for just playing kick, snare, hats on all of the songs. You can take the fills, you can take all the bits and all the sort of sparkly bits. And I was like, yeah, great, sounds good. So I basically would spend an hour and a half or 2 hours just, going mental, basically. That was kind of my role.
Yeah,
fun.
cool. So the Thompson Twins, that's another group that had some really cool songs, and amazing sounding records, right? The whatever the album was that had Hold Me Now.
Yeah, was it Into the Gap, that one? This is the thing, because I always work with them retrospectively. I'm just like,
yeah,
I never know which albums things are off of.
Yeah, I just remember thinking that they had good songs and the albums were really well produced,
Yeah, I think there was that period of time where things just sounded great. And the production, especially on drums, for some reason, it's just iconic. I think that's the thing, whether you like it or you don't like that sort of 80s sound, because some people don't like it, it's iconic. You know exactly what it is. And like you say, you know when you're listening to Phil Collins on an album, because it just sounds so specific. So yeah, I mean, yeah, all the Thompson Twins stuff does just sound amazing. And as I was saying, with sort of giving credence to the songs as they were written and as people knew them, Hold Me Now, that point in the set was always my favorite, because it was the point that the whole crowd were just elated, you know what I mean? And you knew you got it right because of that reaction from the audience, if that makes sense.
I think that's their biggest worldwide hit.
Oh yeah,
it's got to be.
I'd imagine so. Yeah. I think so. It was always the last song of the set, so I'm gonna go with yes.
So did you tour with them as the Thompson Twins and then later with Tom Bailey?
So we always toured as Tom Bailey. What is it? Thompson Twins Tom Bailey, because he wasn't allowed to have just the Thompson Twins name. So it was always Thompson Twins Tom Bailey. But that's such a mouthful. I'm always just like, it's Tom from the Thompson Twins.
Right.
So, yeah.
You're very fun to watch because you're so physical in all your motions. Is that the main way that you're feeling the time, is through your body? Or do you have like other tricks like the heel bounce? Are you singing the rhythms? What's your main timekeeping concepts?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, to be honest. So what I guess it now, so this is interesting, because when I was younger and for some reason I've always had great timekeeping. I don't know why that is. It's just one of those anomalies, right? But so I don't think it's me moving my body. However, I do believe that my feel comes from the way that I move my body, if that makes sense, because it is a spatial thing. And also what I play is definitely informed by the vocals. So I'm often singing along, and that also actually activates my body movement as well in a weird way, because it's about the emotion for me and what that emotion evokes and how that comes out. In terms of actual timekeeping, I don't really know. I think, that's a really hard thing to pinpoint, to be honest. The one thing I will say is that I do remember there was a shift for me in how I saw time, if that makes sense, because growing up, playing to a click was very linear. It was all about that ding, 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 ding. Right. And I went and saw a drummer for a lesson. It's a guy called Andrew Small. He's a drummer over here. He plays with Massive Attack and people like that. And he said to me, because I was talking about time and he has great feel. And I was like, how do you get such great feel? I want better feel. And he said to me, right, how do you see the click? And I was like, what do you mean? How do I see the click? It's an audio thing. It's just ding, ding. And he's like, no, how do you see it? And I was explained. All right, maybe like a linear kind of up, down motion, whatever. He said, okay, well, that's interesting. I actually see it as a circle. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, sort of the let's say the top of the circle is the actual click. Now, everything around it is a circle until we get to the next. So it's ding, 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 ding. And I was like, wow, and it blew my mind that it wasn't this linear thing. There was these other dimensions to it. And I think that's what made me able to kind of move a little more and a little more freely, because it was about this space that I could now move in and play in. And it wasn't 2-dimensional. It was very 3-dimensional. And it really opened up my understanding of time, and I think I kind of went from there. I mean, I'm not answering your question very well because I'm not sure, in all honesty, how I sort of feel time, but it certainly has become a very visceral thing versus just listening to a click and then sort of letting that inform where I should place things, if that makes sense. It's a lot bigger than that, if that makes sense.
Right. And when you're playing in a studio environment, do you always use the click, and how much is that in your mix compared to, let's say, listening to the bass player 60% and the click, 30%, and the rest, 10% or whatever? How do you make that click in your mix?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Again, depends totally on what I'm recording. So if I'm on a live show, because at the moment, Kim Wilde, we use clicks, we have stuff on track. If I can, the click will be minimal if I have something that's programmed that is, I can rely on, basically. But all I know is that obviously time is everything for me. So if I only have a click and everyone else is a bit all over the shop, I will always sort of have that front and center. Let's say in my mix, I'd say maybe, let's take away programming just for the sake of argument. Click maybe 60% or 50% of my mix, let's say 50%. Then I would probably have, if there's any sort of guitar, wait, I'm gonna have to start getting my percentages right now. I feel like I'm having a maths lesson. Right, let's say the guitar's like 30%. So guitar is a really big informer for me. And then I've got my maths already wrong. Okay, 25% guitar, let's say 20% vocals, because that's, again, the most important. And then everything else is probably in that 5%. So bass is not high for me usually in my mix. It's not, I mean, yes, it's important, but it's not my main concern. My main thing to always look into is guitar, click, obviously, guitar and vocals. If there is no guitar, then keys, I guess, but it's like vocals are so important to me. But yeah, in terms of feel and stuff, it's anything that's fairly rhythmic but more constant, I suppose, the strumming of the guitar fits.
Didn't Charlie Watts say the same thing? He was always listening to Keith Richards.
Yep.
Right. Well, that makes sense to me. That totally makes sense, because I know that everyone always says, drums and bass, drums and bass.
Right.
And yeah, that's true. But for me, there's something about the energy of guitar and drums. And if they can lock in and then the bass sit within that, then you've got something special. Then you've got something interesting. But as I say, vocals are king or queen to me anyway. So it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing, as long as those vocals are front and center, the most important thing. So the message is getting across, because at the end of the day, that's all music is. It's storytelling. And for me, obviously, vocals are the most accessible thing for an audience, because as long as they're speaking the same language as the audience member, that's the thing that they're going to connect to most. So that needs to be the thing that everyone can hear best, that is not muddled, that is left space for, and that's paramount to me, basically.
Awesome.
All right, now I am looking at your kit back there. I think that's the vintage Ludwig, yes?
Yes, it is, 1967. Super
Okay.
classic.
So now in the most recent video that you posted on Instagram, I don't know if it was a shadow, or is it possible that your rack tom is so tuned so low that there's actually a wrinkle in the head? Yeah.
Oh yes, that is true. Yeah. I always get so many comments about the wrinkles in my drums, because I have them on the snare drum often as well.
Oh.
It's my way of tuning. I love the sound of a deep drum, and especially on the snare drum, the way that my favorite way to tune it is basically, so let's say you start with all the lugs at even tension, and then the two lugs that are closest to me will always be completely detuned to nothing. And then gradually they'll just be slightly more on the next two, sort of going in a circle. So the next two furthest, then the next two furthest a little bit tighter, then a little bit tighter, and then right at the top furthest from me is the tightest. Yep. And I sort of mess around with that tuning. And then with the bottom head, I will often, not always, but often, either it'll be even tension, very tight on the bottom head, or the four lugs either side of the snare drum, the actual snare bed will be completely detuned, and then that gives this very interesting kind of almost reverse snare sound. It's very hard to explain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoy messing around with snare drum sounds, especially, and kind of just making it as fat and as warm and as just gorgeous as possible, basically.
Yeah, and I watched you play along to a Darkness tune, and the snare was really nice and fat and low sounding, you know.
Oh, thank you.
But I don't know if that was you, if that was the original drum track, or if you were, you know what I mean,
Oh,
just
was that
doing
the
a demo.
Roaring Waters? Yeah,
Pardon
that
me?
would have been playing over the top of the original track.
Oh,
So it was
right.
probably a mix between the two. So
Mm.
yeah, that's probably what that was, because that was in my first iteration of my studio that sounded terrible.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So also, I'm looking at it looks like a sub kick type thing back there, but it appears to be white. So maybe this is something that you made or had made.
No, so this is so this is the thing about me. I don't make things because I will break things.
Yeah.
And the thought of trying to take the NS10 cone and make a sub out of it, I was like, I will be electrocuted. I will probably die. So let me just find an. So anyway, there's a company called Solomon who does these sub kicks. So I thought, right, and it's the only company I could find. So I was like, yeah, all right, I'll try that. And it's really brilliant, really nice. And it looks nice. It looks like it should belong on a Stormtroopers kit. So I'm happy.
Yeah. And is that a FET 47 type mic?
Warm Audio's version of FET 47. And the reason I got that is because I was like, I cannot spend the amount of money that I would need to spend on a FET 47 without making sure that the room sounds good enough to afford a mic that good. So I'm currently, that's sort of one of the next mics on my list, because this room does happen to sound very nice. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah, it does. And I've been lusting after your Coles overheads over back there.
So the very first proper session I did, there were a pair of Coles on it, and I never forgot it. And I was like, right, when I make it, those are the mics I'm gonna have. So that was kind of a big deal getting those mics. Yeah, it was kind of a big deal.
What percentage of your overall drum sound comes from those overhead mics, would you say?
I'd say probably 30%, maybe 40%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I quite like the close mic kind of sound. That's usually the majority of my sound, really, are the close mics. But yeah, I mean, those overheads do just sound absolutely gorgeous. It's just undeniable. As long as the room sounds good, then you're kind of in good stead with those. You can't really go wrong.
Yeah. So let's see. And then there's this very heavy duty boom stand that seems to be the closest to where you're sitting. What is the mic that's up there?
I actually hit my face on that stand literally 10 minutes before I came on this call with you guys. That's why.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I was thinking, this is not going to be a good look if I'm developing like a black eye as we're talking, but it hasn't happened yet, so that's good. So that's where my Coles are. They're off that heavy duty boom.
Oh.
There's also a Bayer, what is it, M160?
160?
Yeah, so one of them is a mono overhead as well. But yeah, this weight is just the Coles. The Coles are the heaviest mics in all the land.
Yeah.
And so they don't fall on my face and I don't break them. I'm clumsy as well. This is the thing. So I need to make sure that things don't fall over.
Yeah, I don't.
As I've just illustrated, I've already bashed my face against that today. So yeah.
I don't think I have a mic stand that would support those Coles mics. So
yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot. So
and
I highly recommend you get a heavy stand or a weight.
yeah. Now, is there a video that I can look up that has a proper studio tour with, all the gear?
There isn't yet.
Okay.
But there will be at some point. It's on my very long list, as long as my arm. It's a funny one, studio tours, because I always feel really weird because I'm often changing stuff, and also I never feel like I really know what I'm talking about. So I feel like such a charlatan, even though I'm doing this day in and day out. So yeah, I will at some point. Also, I'm so scatty. I don't think I could present it in a very coherent way, if that makes sense. Like,
well, do it anyway.
Look at that.
Yeah. We don't care. Just do it.
Shiny objects.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What is your internal kick mic?
Internal kick is an AKG, D12, sorry, AKG D12 on the kick in.
And it's hard to see from here, depth wise, like how far things are away. Like the FET 47, is that like 4 feet away from the kick drum?
So I'd say it's like 3 feet away from where the front head would be, but
Right.
it's obviously there's no front head. So yeah, maybe 4 feet away from the batter head, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've also got obviously, the 421s on the toms.
Yeah, they're lovely. They're beautiful.
Yeah, and then 57 on the snare, or what? What have you got?
Yeah, so I've got a 57. I've got a what's it, an AKG 251? Is that right?
Is it a
Sorry.
451?
Sorry, 451. Yeah, a C451, and then a Bayer Dynamic 201 on the snare top, which is my favorite. It's got such warmth to it, and it's just I love it so much. So I've got that, and then I've got I've got an Aston Starlight on the hole on the snare drum as well, just as a mix in thing.
Yeah.
And then I've got a 57 on the snare bottom as well.
So
yeah.
How many total mics is that on the snare? Like 19?
I'll tell you what, one day it might be. No, so that's 5. I know that's excessive. 3 on the top, 1 on the side, 1 on the bottom. And then there's also a PZM mic on the floor underneath the snare as well, just to catch a bit of the kick drum and then the snare bottom. Someone once said to me it's the truth mic, and I thought that's really cool.
Okay.
It's a great way to get a bit of definition.
Let's see. Do you mic your hi-hat?
I do. That's got an Aston Starlight as well. I tried miking it from the bottom a few times, but I do prefer it from the top.
And then there looks to be a mic over the ride cymbal.
Oh no, it's an ADX 51. There's a worst mic here, so the sausage mic placement. Yeah. That's a Aston Spirit mic. That's really, again, great for kind of capturing the whole kit as a kind of image. And I actually learned that from the front of house for The Darkness. He taught me that because we were doing some production rehearsals and he didn't have many channels, and he was like, right, I'm only micing your kit with 1 mic. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, look, watch this. And he just put I think it was an SM58 in that position, and I was like, wow, that's really incredible. I've never seen that before. So that was a cool thing I learned off him. That was good. And then I've got a few room mics. So I've got a Reslo mic over here and another Coles, and then a Shure SM5B or whatever it's called, the podcasting mic. It's great as a room mic. Really
SM7B.
Yeah, SM7B. That's it.
I'm
I'm useless. This is what I'm saying. My memory. This is what the tour's going to be like. It's going to be me going, this is an SM19B. And this is...
Yeah, you mean the studio tour thing that you do. Yeah.
Exactly. It's going to be all misinformation. It's going to be rubbish.
But then, you can do what some people do and do corrections. You know what I mean? What shape is that room?
It is rectangular.
Oh, good.
But only just. So it's 4 meters by 4.5 meters. And then the roof is sloping. I'd love to tell you what it goes from and to. I think it goes from 2 meters to 3, but I maybe not actually. Maybe it's 2.5. But yeah,
that's a huge plus. Having that sloped ceiling like that.
Massive. Like I say, it was purpose built, this building. So we were just like, right, let's just do it the best that we can with the space that we've got. And one of the things was sloping roof. It's just going to make so much of a difference, and it really has. I mean, I couldn't hope for a better sound in here, and I have windows in here and it sounds great, which is even crazier. I have natural light. I've got big patio doors. Like it's unbelievable. So I consider myself incredibly lucky.
Let's see. Now, did you position the kit in different spots in the room before you decided on,
No, we haven't gotten that far with moving stuff, because when we built it, we had some acousticians come in and literally be like, right, this would be the prime position for the kit, along with, you want to have a view out the windows, so this would be the place to put it. So I'm sure at some point I will sort of move it around a bit, but like straight away it was like, I just need to be back recording for my clients because people were waiting and waiting for me to be ready again. And I was like, right, I just need to, get going again. And we'll do all that fun moving stuff around stuff when I have a bit of time. I mean, goodness knows when that will be, but yeah.
So are you saying that that room was sort of custom built, or the whole house was built from the scratch?
No, so the house already existed, and this is an outbuilding. So, and it was built specifically. We had the space for it, and it was like, right, let's create the studio that you want in the space that we have.
Yeah.
And because, like I say, I've had 2 studios before this one. The first one was horrendous. It sounded awful. It was essentially an old converted garage. It was very small, very thin. There was like no treatment. It was badly soundproof. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong with it went wrong with it.
Yeah,
And that was because of the way that we did it. We didn't have a lot of knowledge, and it was kind of what it was. The next one was better. We got like a whole bunch of treatment and stuff like that, but it ended up being a very dead sound, which was fine. It did the job that I needed it to do. So, I mean, when they say third time lucky, we're like, right, let's make sure that this one is like everything that I could possibly envisage would be the best scenario. And it kind of, it's a little bit live, but we've got some lovely treatment, and it just, the whole thing is just magical. Really
yeah.
is.
I mean, listening to your voice, it doesn't sound super live, you know what I mean, or boomy. You don't want something like that necessarily, because you can't take out natural room reverb.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah, you want a little bit of liveness, but not enough that it's going to ruin if someone wants a deader sound, for instance. So it's kind of, it seems to be a good balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for now, at least. I mean, I may change my mind in like 6 months' time or a year's time, start taking stuff off the walls and stuff. But for now,
and do you engineer your own recordings? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I do. It's only out of necessity, essentially.
Yeah. So with all those room mics and with the number of microphones that you have, do you what do you do about phase issues, or do you get them?
Weirdly, not really. A little bit in the usual spots, as you would expect with sort of the snare mics and stuff. But I think for some reason, and like I say, I don't know. I think I have had phase issues in the past that I've dealt with, but for some reason this seems to be okay. I mean, it's part of the reason that I ended up doing the pattern that I do with my overheads was to minimize phase. Everything that I do, I try and make sure that it is to minimize phase and make things easier for me and for my clients when they receive my files, essentially. I mean, obviously with room mics, you're going to get a bit of like, there's going to be separation, but that is the nature of recording drums. And yeah, for some reason, and I'd love to tell you it's because I'm this amazing engineer. I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I'm just trying stuff all the time. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a lot of phase. And all I do is sort of use a very basic correlation meter and just flip the phase if I need to and solve it. And I don't know, like I say, I barely know what I'm doing, but it seems to sound good and people seem to be happy. So that's kind of my marker of like, I must be doing something right, although I don't know what that is.
I record using room mics as well. And when I, hear people saying, yeah, you're going to have phase problems. Well, what I do is I'll solo the snare and just loop it. And I go, okay, so that sounds good. And then I'll start adding the other mics. And if it starts to sound bad, I'll know but I'm not hearing it sound any worse when I add the other mics in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I 100% know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what are people talking about? Like, I don't, I'm kind of with you, but I think you're making a really good point that at the end of the day, if your ears are happy with it, then we'll go with that. Like, even if there is like technically wrong issues, if you like, it's not, I don't think it's that big a deal these days with, being able to fix it. And at the end of the day, my stuff goes off to an engineer or a producer or whoever, and I'm sure that they can I'm sure they're used to getting all manner of stuff sent to them, so I know that their starting point with my drums is always going to be good. It may not be perfect because I don't know what that looks like, if that makes sense, but I know that it's a good starting point. And as I say, I get great feedback from people. So, and I ask people explicitly, I'm like, look, tell me what I can improve because I want this to be the best thing it can be. So, and yeah, it's just, I used to get notes, I used to get, this and that, but now people are just like, sounds amazing. I'm like, oh, okay,
good.
great.
Yeah.
If you're happy, I'm happy. Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna hire you for a track on this, this thing that I'm producing, and I know that you like storytellers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love a story in a song. It's my
And,
favorite thing.
yeah, and that's what this girl does. She tells stories in her songs. Do you have any other?
Yeah. I noticed on some of your videos, your left stick is backwards when you play. And what's your thought behind that? Is it for the tone or is it for the feel? Or what is it?
It's a bit of both, and I'd love to say it's an original thought. It's not. Steve Gadd used to do it, and
Right.
someone told me about it once, and they were like, why don't you try that? And it definitely gives a different feel to the way that you play, and just having that extra weight in the front end of your snare stick and also hitting the center of the drum just does give a bit of a different tone. I don't often play like that anymore, to be honest, but there was definitely a period of time where it was my go-to sort of move. The only problem is then your sticks end up becoming left and right, so you can't just pick up any old stick, which is a pain. So I wouldn't recommend it for like live stuff when, if you break a stick and you pick up the wrong one and it's like, oh no, now I'm holding the bit that's got all the horrible notches in it from me hitting the rim, and it's a nightmare. But yeah, well spotted. I will say, not many people spot that, so very well spotted, Bill.
I think I noticed that on the darkness one that you were doing.
Yes, it would have been. I was playing that way around for the darkness, just to give that extra bit of, you know what I mean? Just that little.
And are there any gigs that you do where you play a rim shot every time? Do you play like that?
Yeah, well, the darkness, definitely. Kim, it's difficult because it's electronics. I mean, technically I'm playing a rim shot, but it's on an electronic snare, so it doesn't count. But if I had an acoustic snare, that would be rim shot all the way, pretty much. What other gigs?
What kind of a kit is it? What brand electronic kit are you playing?
Oh, Yamaha. So multi 12, basically, with a bunch of pads just connected to it. And then on the Tom Bailey Thompson Twins, that was a Yamaha 900 brain with a bunch of pads. I use that on the Cher Lloyd gig as well. So yeah, it's always Yamaha stuff because it just works really well. So
yeah, cool. And I think that I saw some tour dates for Kim Wilde. Is that going on now, or is that soon?
Yes. So we just had on Monday, we just had our first show for the Greatest Hits tour that was meant to happen in 2020, and it was the premiere show. It was amazing. It was so good. So this sort of carries on for the rest of the year. The main bulk of touring is sort of September through to December, and that's basically the UK and loads of Europe for the back end of the year. And then we've got festivals sort of over the summer. So and again, it's mostly Europe. Unfortunately, we're not really over in the States, which is such a shame because we really want to get over there at some point.
So is Kids in America the biggest sort of worldwide noticeable or well-known tune?
Yeah, 100%. It's the last song of the set. We all go crazy. I mean, that I know that she's technically a pop artist, but that show is an out and out rock show. It is. There is so much energy and just it is chaos. It's amazing. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. And because you've got 3 family members on stage. You've got Kim, you've got her brother, and then you've got her niece. And there's something about that creates such a family feeling on the road and on stage that means that everyone's constantly taking the mick out of each other. There's a lot of love like flying around, so everyone just adores each other so much, and there's a lot of respect, and yeah, it's very different feeling to a lot of other tours, and it's great. It's a great environment to be in.
Well, yeah, I was wondering about the Hawkins brothers.
Yeah.
Do they get along?
Oh yeah, they're thick as thieves, those two. Yeah, totally. They're very different personalities, actually. Now that I think about it, but in the same way most siblings are. I mean, me and my sister are very different, but she's my best friend, and I think they're the same. I know that they've had fallings out in the past, apparently, but No, they're always really great with each other, and it's really great to watch like the creative process of siblings and the way that they bounce off of each other, and just having that history obviously and the same points of reference, and just there's an unspoken language that happens, and you just see things evolve, and you're like, how did that even, I don't know how that happened, but this is incredible. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing to watch.
I think I asked that question because, everybody knows about the brothers in Oasis.
Oh, the Gallagher brothers, yeah.
The Gallagher
Yeah.
brothers.
I don't think they like each other very much.
No. Let's see. Also, there's the Davis brothers and the Kinks.
Oh yeah, apparently, yeah.
And that word, that last name is pronounced Davis in England. Even
Well,
though
there's two spellings. So
yes.
It's either IS, which is Davis, or
Mhm.
IES, which is technically Davies. But if people say Davis for mine, I'm like, oh, whatever, that's fine.
I've always known British people, to pronounce the Davies name as Davis.
Yeah,
Davis.
yeah, it's just one of those. It's a Welsh or Scottish thing, so it just depends on
Yeah.
the person. So yeah,
Mm.
I'm happy either way. I really couldn't care less.
All right, I'm looking at your snare drum collection back there. I always wonder when I see people store their snare drums vertically like that, how do you not hear the snares buzzing all the time?
Yeah, again, it's one of these things where I thought the same, and I was thinking this is going to go wrong, me storing them next to the kit that I'm recording. So obviously I switched them all off, fine, whatever. For a while I put towels over them just to kind of dampen them, but actually, and again, I don't know why this is, they don't seem to be picked up on my mics when I record. It's the weirdest thing. Like I said, I feel like I've hit the jackpot with this room and this mic collection and just the way that everything is. It just doesn't seem to bother any recording that I've done. The only thing that bothered me the other day was that my hi-hat pedal was getting all squeaky, and the squeak was louder than the actual hats, and I was like, right, this is a problem. So the WD-40 came out and that was fine. But yeah, it's they seem to be fine. They seem to behave themselves for some reason. It's weird.
Any favorites back there on that rack?
Of course. Of course. So the one that's on my kit at the moment is actually a drum supply drum from down in Nashville. That was a present for me. I have no idea what it's made of. I don't know what the spec is. All I know is it sounds gorgeous. It's made of some type of wood. I don't know what. Like I say, it was a present, so I don't know. I've got a walnut Craviotto over there that is a 14x5, which is just a stunning drum. I'm not into high pitched sounding snare drums, but that is, and it's very open, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and usually that's not my bag at all, but it just sounds great. And then obviously I've got the standard sort of 70s Ludwig 402, I've got a 60s 400, a 70s Acrolite, which are just my go-tos. The Acrolite was used on the Darknesses album. The whole album was done with that one snare drum.
Wait a minute. Wait. What dimension is the Acrolite? Is it the 5?
Yep.
Because I let Bill borrow my Acrolite, and he was like, yeah.
What are you talking about? It's I think the Acrolite is one of the most underrated snare drums in the world.
Okay.
I'm convinced. What did you like about it? Tell me.
So you tune it. Did you tune it quite low then?
Yeah. Again, wrinkly snare. So yeah.
Okay. Right.
In fact, by the end of the session, the whole snare skin split. I still have the snare drum head from that session because I just thought that's so unusual. I never split a snare drum skin, but I was so worried about changing the head and ruining the sound. I was like, I'm just gonna have to get through this. So the first layer of the skin broke, and I was like, this could go horribly wrong. And then it sort of held out until the end of the session. But what didn't you like about it, Phil? What didn't you like?
I think the tuning range, it just seemed like since it only had 8 lugs, I couldn't tune it dynamically all over the place. And I didn't realize it's got to be low to probably sound at its best.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's at its best, but it's how I like it, that's for sure. And when it is detuned, it does, because it looks like it wouldn't work. It looks like it's meant to be tight and, high, and maybe it is, I don't know, but the way that I tuned it, I was like, oh, this is not, and then when putting a mic on it, it just sounds amazing. It sounds like it doesn't look how it sounds, if that makes sense.
I've heard that Kenny Aronoff has recorded with Acrolites, Steve Gadd, and probably loads of others. It's called Acrolite because it's light. It's made of aluminum, but so are the Superphonics that we all use.
Yeah.
It's aluminum shell. It's just that they're chrome plated.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
And
But
I
they're beautiful
suppose-
drums as well. I don't have one of those, you see. Maybe
Which
if
one?
I had a Superphonic. So if I
Oh.
had one of those, maybe I'd be saying that.
Yeah, that's my go-to. So
So
Yeah.
I think now you said that you had a Ludwig 402.
Yeah.
I believe that the 402 is the John Bonham snare,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And I think that Superphonic actually describes the throw off, the type of throw off that it is.
Oh,
I think
really?
technically that's what it is. Yeah, because there's the Superphonic and then there's super sensitive. I
Right.
think that's what it is because when you say that you don't have a Superphonic, I
Well, I
think you
guess I
do.
do.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
I
is
do
it?
love the 402.
It's the John Bonham snare, yes?
Yes, yeah, the 402 is the jump, but of course it's a deeper snare, so maybe that's why I'm not connecting the two. So
It's a
that makes
6.5 by 14.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm quite sure that is the 402 that we all refer to as the Superphonic. But you also said you had a 400. Now, what is that?
So the 400 is the it's the 14 by 5.5,
Okay.
and I think it might be the same as the 402 in its material. So maybe that's now I'm getting confused. You see, now I'm getting all I know is that I love them. This is me all over. I never know what I'm looking at, playing, whatever. I know if I like it or if I don't, but I couldn't tell you what it's made
All
of,
you
which
need.
is terrible.
So Pete Thomas, the drummer for Elvis Costello and the Attractions, he recorded most of those classic early Elvis records with a 5.5 Superphonic 400 or whatever one, and he calls it the biscuit tin.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and Americans think of biscuits as something different.
I
Biscuits
know.
in England are cookies.
Yes, exactly. And biscuits for you are something that you have with gravy, which is
Yeah.
not the gravy that you have over here either. Gravy that you have over here is kind of like, what is it like for you over there? We have it with a roast, and it's like this lovely brown, lovely sort of sauce. But your gravy is like white often.
It could be both. It could be either.
Oh, can it? Okay.
Yeah.
I've only ever seen the white version. I'm like, oh, what is that?
Mm.
Not gravy.
Well, we would love to continue talking about food, but it looks like we're at the end of our hour, unfortunately.
That's a shame. Well, it's been such a joy
was quite quick.
chatting with you guys. Thank you so
Mm.
much for letting me talk about drums and trying to work out what I'm trying to say most of the time.
Yeah, but no, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much,
Thank you
Emily.
so much for your time and your
okay.
inspiration.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Have a nice day, won't you? And I'll speak to you again
Okay.
soon, I'm sure.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.